As always, in Poland. I was in Konin in summer, and being here. Sorry, I'm a little bit still stunned by the opening remarks. I would have not expected that much of enthusiasm to go beyond coal and become carbon neutral. It's very nice to hear that. It's really very nice to hear that. I think I must start. I made a mistake when I agreed with the organizers that this should be the title of my presentation, because who knows about the future and what the future will be. So I want to lower down your expectations a little bit. I'll try to, of course, touch what the future will bring, but you will see that I will be largely looking at what is happening now and what has happened in the past. And from that, learn a little bit on the future. Who am I? I'm Timon Wehnert. I work for the Wuppertal Institute, which is a think tank in Germany. We're about, old slide, 250 now. We're about 350 researchers working on sustainability issues. I've been working on energy and climate research for the last 25 years. And for the last 10 years, I've specifically worked on coal phase out in Germany, in Europe, currently very much outside of Europe in those countries which are really the toughest countries to move away from coal. I'm currently working a lot in Indonesia, which is the biggest exporter of coal globally. I want to take first a little bit of a look back, then look a little bit outside of our bubble of Europe and look at what are renewables doing globally. Then touch some things which I think, what do we really know about the future and the future will come, and where are uncertainties, where are the challenges? And probably most of those uncertainties and challenges are touched upon in more detail in the specific talks during this day. What you see, this black and white print, is a newspaper advertisement from 1993. I studied physics. I started studying physics in 1992. I don't remember seeing this in the newspaper at the time. I dug it up at a later stage. It is at the early stage of climate policy debate. And basically, the German utilities say, well, we have to go away from coal. In 1993, amazing statement. But there is no other way to go away from coal other than nuclear, right? I don't want to start the nuclear debate as a German. This would be a long debate, obviously. But what I find really interesting is this one sentence. I have to read it out. Because even in the long term, renewable energy sources such as solar, hydro, wind cannot cover more than 4% of our electricity demand. It is not possible, right? They're not saying it's difficult or it's expensive. It's not possible, period. Right? Let's not fool ourselves. More than 4% is not possible. And when people have talked to me, Timon, what do you think about the future? And of course, we do nitty-gritty, detailed technology assessments, and as researchers do. But if you ask basically at my heart, where do you take your confidence that we can go towards high share of renewables, 100% renewables? To me, it's basically this advertisement, right? Because we know more than 4% is not possible, and we're now at 55. So we've 12 times more than impossible we've already achieved. So the rest should also be possible. What is the status quo? On the way here, I don't know, I did what I sometimes do when I'm bored or when I have time. I look up a beautiful app which is called Electricity Maps, and this is data from, October 19th, so that's last Sunday up until you basically see Monday and Tuesday of one country in Europe. I checked several countries in Europe, and what you see at this bottom, the big brown thing with a little up and down, that is coal. The yellow bumps is the solar contribution during the day. The light blue is wind. Below that line is what exports. Then this gray line on the top is natural gas, and then there is some imports and other sources. So I've looked at several countries, and I picked this country, and what is your guess? Any guesses which country that is? So it's this week. You have a feeling of how was the weather in Poland, how may have been in Germany. We don't really know how it was in Spain or other countries, but can you have a guess of, okay, what is this in peak day? Probably 20-25% of solar and a good 10, 15, 20% in wind in the peaks, but a substantial share of coal. Any guesses? Any volunteers to guess? Poland? Poland, Germany? Okay, I put another country, just not spelling it. Actually, it is, to me, it looks in a way different, but in a way similar, right? We have those day peaks of solar. We have the demand also is peaking in top. Less coal, more wind. And of course, to I don't know, spill it, the left side is Poland, the right side is Germany. And I find it surprising in a way how similar the two profiles are. Of course, there is more coal in the electricity mix, and there is now more wind in the electricity in Poland, and there is more wind in the electricity mix in Germany. But all in all, I found it again surprisingly similar. And what you see, and maybe when you look at the left side, you see like before and after the yellow solar contributions, like the contributions from coal go up and then go down during the day. Basically, so we see the coal-fired power plants are running flexible, basically buffering the renewable share. And this is something which we're going to see when we talk about looking into the future. This is something we're going to see in the future again, that we as humans wake up and use electricity more early in the morning and later in the evening than the sun comes up and gives a serious contribution. I've added a few more mixes. The third one is Spain, with the purple is nuclear, just flat in, and obviously more sun. But again, also there you see they have this dark blue is pumped hydro, where basically in the morning and in the evening, basically they're buffering off what the sun is basically too slow or too late to provide. And then at the far right is Denmark, with during these days no fossil fuel input, but a lot of import and export, as you see above and below the line, basically pushing electricity from the Nordic countries into basically into the rest of Europe, Germany, Poland, Netherlands, wherever. I find it very interesting looking at that, because for me it gives a glimpse of the challenges we have in the electricity system. So when we look at annual electricity mix, so I picked Poland and Germany again, and in a way, well, you could interpret this in two ways. One is, oh, it's very different, because there's twice as much coal by Poland used compared to Germany. But apart from that, I actually find the two consumption patterns extremely similar. Of course, there's more coal being used currently in Poland, but if you look at the like percentages, well, Germany uses a little bit more natural gas, but then when we look at the big chunks of renewables is wind and solar, a certain share of biofuels, a little bit of water coming in. It is, in a way, from the structure, fairly similar. I now want to take a look outside of Europe, and I looked at India. Sorry, it's 23, but it hasn't changed that much. And again, okay, it looks like, oh wow, India is massively more coal, and so. But if I combine this dotted line is basically the fossil fuel of Poland, and then the second dotted line is all the fossil fuel of India, including oil and gas. And when we look at, oh, that difference between Poland and India is this much on the scale, right? And I encounter, when I talk to peers in in Europe, we often feel like, oh, we're the only ones in Europe who are actually pushing the renewables. But when you really look at data outside of Europe, this is not true. Other countries are, with some delays and different backgrounds, but they are actually following, and I would claim they will be leading quite quickly. So, okay, so this is, there's a new report by the International Energy Agency looking at renewables 2025, just came out a few days ago. And if you look at what are the shares of renewables, or the amount of renewables which is installed, you see from 2019 to 2024-25, this has more than doubled. So it's a massive ramp up. It's much more renewables just in the last few years that are built globally. This is global capacity additions. And you see the big chunks is solar, right? The orange thing is solar, is large scale solar on utility scale, really large scale solar. And the bright yellow is distributed like on houses, but could also be fairly large on houses, not just individual houses, but like supermarkets or things like that. And then the blue is wind. So this is really what is being put into the net. And if you look at the numbers, we're at 700 gigawatts of renewables which have been put in. I looked at news beginning of this year. In the first 4 months, China has put in as much solar into their system as Germany has. So what Germany had put in over the last 25 years, China has put into their system from January to April. And when we look at where actually is renewable electricity capacity additions, where is it coming from? You see China will be basically passing the European Union as of this year. They will be putting more renewables in as all of the EU. So my or our probably feeling like, oh, we're pushing in so hard and we're the front runners is in a way true, because China actually does have more people than the EU, but in a way it's not. What I find, well, the US is a long story in that will be probably not going up with the current president as much as we would wish for. What I find extremely interesting is India in this case, because India is the countries, if you follow the international negotiations, India is the country that has claimed they're a poor country, they have one of the lowest CO2 emissions per capita. It's first the industrialized countries that have to do their share, and then India will follow, right? This is why I also put in India in the other thing. But India is really massively investing into solar and wind. And the reason, sorry, this is a terrible graph. I should have redone it myself. But the reason is that costs have gone down massively. I don't know if you can see, if you just take the graph, which is on the left side to the very top, that is the yellowish graph. That is the cost of solar PV in 2010. And it's probably hard for you to see, but this is the second lowest chart on the right side now. So within the last 15 years, solar has come from being the most expensive electricity source to the second cheapest after just onshore wind. And this, for me, I just think it is something we have to repeat, because, I don't know, when you talk to old people like my age or older, then all of my life I grew up like, oh, solar is more expensive, but we'll actually need it. It is something we need for the future. But that has changed. It has changed over the last years. It's not the most expensive. And this is why India and China are going for it. Okay. A very quick look on energy scenarios. The World Energy Outlook of the International Energy Agency, they have done, what you see here is a very long-term thing of clean energy, meaning all renewables, and which is green, oil, coal, and natural gas, in what they call their STEP scenario. Their STEP scenario is basically all the energy policies which are in place and technology development they assume. So this scenario says no new climate policy, right? If you assume there was no new climate policy coming, no country in the world would put in new climate policy, only what they have already in their books, then this is what they expect till 2050, the uptake of renewables, which is massive. If you assume that countries are putting in more climate policy, right? And APS is what they have announced, very informally announced of we're going to do it, but it's not in a very specific policy, or what we need to go to net zero, then of course the amount of fossil fuels goes down massively and renewables goes up. And the overall energy consumption should also go up. So energy efficiency would be a thing. But what I find interesting is, even if you assume nobody wants to be any more ambitious than we are today, even if we ignore climate change is coming and don't do anything more than what we have, this is the expected ramp up of renewables. Okay, some things of what is known and what is uncertain. A colleague of mine very critically analyzed a set of scenarios which are for Germany. What you see here is the CO2 emissions in those different scenarios from 1990 to 2045, when Germany wants to become carbon neutral. Until 2020, it's existing data. What you see is that some of those scenarios actually go into negative emissions. The new set of German energy scenarios are in a way that the energy sector must be below zero emissions, negative emissions, so that we can offset emissions in other sectors, and that would be mainly agriculture, where we still have emissions. This is a tough one. So we're not planning to go to zero, but to negative emissions. It may sound very small, but if you really think of, ooh, this is dramatic, less than zero, that is ambitious. Okay, these are, sorry, again, difficult to see. These are the different scenarios, and I just want to highlight one thing. If you look at the very right side, it's in 2045, it's those 6 scenarios. Light blue is onshore wind, the dark blue is offshore wind, and yellow is solar. So these are very different scenarios with very different assumptions. But basically they're saying, hey, 80 to 90% is going to be wind and solar, period. We know that. Whatever assumptions you take, 80 to 90% is going to be wind and solar in Germany, and similar to most countries around the world. The issues that we're fighting in terms of discussing, controversially discussing, is how much hydrogen do we actually need? What is the role of hydrogen? Will it be used for very small niches? Will it be used for as a fuel for like gas-fired power plants, which we use for hydrogen? How much batteries? How much imports do we have? Do we have imports from just our neighbors or imports of Northern Africa? And how much curtailment of wind and PV do we have? Like basically, how often do we shut it off? We have more capacity of wind and solar that we need in summer, for example, and we have to shut it off a little bit. But I find this interesting. When we look into the future, there is a lot of degree of certainty what we need, and some things that we are uncertain, that as experts, these are decisive, we need to discuss. But if you're non-expert, it looks very similar. Okay. What do I see? What are challenges and open questions? For me, the biggest thing to achieve, and one of the biggest challenges, is to go for more energy efficiency. It's like the energy efficiency again. It's not sexy. It's not renewables. It's this renovating houses, better appliances, more energy efficient cars. Don't talk to Germans about energy efficient cars, right? We don't want that in a way. And public transport is probably even worse than energy efficient cars. But actually, we need to go there, right? And I think, we need to go there. The other thing is, as I pointed out with the bits and pieces, we have to think our grid and our electricity differently. Up till now, I would say for Germany, it was like the first 50% of renewables, of wind and solar, we pushed into the system. Basically, we left the system as it was. Don't talk to the grid operators. They would tell you differently. But it's just a little bit tweaks and twists, not a major thing. Now we're talking the next 50 to 80%. That will be interesting. The 80 to 100%, that's a challenge. That's really something for engineers. It's more, how do we get demand more flexible? Do we really convince people who, and industry, to basically tune down their demand when electricity prices are high, use more when there's a lot of solar and wind? How do we have better grids, and not grids only within the countries, but also across the countries, between Germany and Poland, but even maybe down to Northern Africa, minimum to Spain. And I think one thing which we need to start discussing is new market designs. How do we, so far in Germany, I'm much more aware of Germany than I'm Poland, please excuse that. But in Germany, renewables have been incentivized as, okay, put as much electricity in the grid. But we've not been incentivizing at, hey, we know there's every morning, every evening, there's this thing where we do not have enough electricity because the sun goes up too late. So how do we incentivize having more at these crucial times? And this will be part of setting up new market structures and support schemes. This is an interesting topic. It's about global energy trade. And no, so far energy trade is coal, is gas, is oil. My hypothesis is this will change. In the future, we'll see a lot of green energy being green hydrogen, which you cannot really transport over long distances. So it's probably partly green hydrogen and green hydrogen derivatives like green ammonia. And future energy which we import will come from countries that have a lot of wind and solar. And these are the, like, if it's red, then it's an area where combined solar and wind is cheap to produce green hydrogen. And if it's blue, then it's fairly expensive. And you see Germany and Poland are somewhere in the middle. So we will be importing green energy in terms of green hydrogen and derivatives for our industry one way or another. The interesting thing, and that's the interesting thing for industrialized areas, will our industry stay here and import it? Or will our industry say, well, maybe I just move there where it's cheap, right? The reason why areas like Silesia, the Ruhr area, or the UK have attracted so much heavy industry, because there was coal, there was cheap energy. So can we keep it at a time where we're not the global leaders of cheap energy? And I think this is very important, and this will be a tough discussion, of course, as soon as you start talking to workers in unions, of saying, hey, honestly, put on the table, maybe this part of the value chain, we can only keep that much, because we want to keep that part of the industry. We would love to do that. But maybe this part, if we're honest, this is a part which we need to let go, because we will not be competitive. And there is a big debate in Germany currently going on whether we will be importing green hydrogen, or actually will we be importing green iron from countries like South Africa or Colombia, Namibia, and how will our iron and steel makers, how will they transform? Again, another thing to discuss for minimum an hour. Last thing I want to make is, and this has been also raised, is how to make the transition just. And the term just transition has been covered with coal phase out and the coal workers in the coal regions, which was a lot of focus in Europe, and rightfully so, because it is important. But I would like to extend our view of what is a just transition. My example, again, an example from Germany, is we have been in Germany supporting energy efficient buildings very strongly in the past. But who gets the support? It's people who own a building. By definition, people in Germany who own a building are not really part of the poorest part of society. It's actually, if you own a house, it's most likely you're part of the richer half of society. But you get the governmental support for energy efficiency, while poor people don't get it. If you look at electric vehicles, so Germany has been supporting electric vehicles and the bigger they are, the more support you got. Thus, the richer you were, the more support you got. While people who probably couldn't even afford a car did not get any part of this. From a climate perspective, this makes sense because we're quick wins in cutting down the emissions. From a social perspective, this does not make sense. And there is a growing debate. I know the debate has been much stronger in Poland ever since because the question of energy poverty was a big issue in Poland. But I think of how do we actually fine-tune our support mechanisms and our framework to make it more just would be an important point. Last slide, I conclude. I will not go into those details. There's a lot of things where I maybe just touched, like hydrogen grids, and if you looked at the agenda, they will be taken up during this day. Maybe I just want to close with a personal note. What I presented was a lot of status quo and a little bit looking into the future. And if you look at those numbers of specifically of Poland, of how much renewables there are in Poland, if you imagine we would have met here 15 years ago, and you had this speaker from Germany invited and saying, actually, I think in 2025, Poland is going to have 10% solar and 15% wind in the system. My guess would be that 80% of the people in the room, unless it's like a crazy NGO or like a small university bubble I'm talking to, but if it's this audience opened by the Marshal of the Marshal Office, probably 80% would have said, no, frankly, I don't think so. And if you would have, 15 years ago, if you would have asked my German peers of, what do you think Poland will do in 15 years down the road? Do you think this is realistic? I would guess 95% of Germans would have said, I don't think so. This is cold country. They're never gonna, whatever. So are we on line to reach the Paris Agreement, and are we in line to stay below 2 degrees? No, sorry. But on an optimistic note, if we look at how much we have achieved, I found it fantastic. And why am I saying this? Because I currently work a lot with Indonesia, and whenever I travel to Indonesia, which is the biggest coal exporters, it is a very, very tough business to discuss. And I would, of course, it's always my job to bring something from Europe and, hey, this is how we do it and what can you learn from it? But then they often say, oh yeah, but you Germans, you're so rich, whatever you do, it doesn't apply to us in Indonesia. Of course, the next time I will bring data from Poland saying, hey, Germany and Poland, these have been the coal countries in the EU, I mean, after Britain left, right? But these are the 3 coal countries in the EU. If we make the transition, we'll be the leading example for the world. And maybe that's my inspirational, I don't know, thing to say to kick off this conference. Thank you.